Just give it a few seconds, please, Chair. I know it says it there, but my other screen.
Hey, how you doing?
We're still in practice
Oh,
session.
Berlina, could you take us out of that, or do I have to?
Oh, I gotcha. We should be good.
Okay, we're ready to go, Chair.
Okay, and with that, the Wednesday, November 10, 2021 Transportation Policy Board meeting is in effect. Vina, will you do the identification of participants?
Yeah, Chair, would you like to introduce yourself? Graham, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Oh. Andy always does it last, but that's okay. I'll do it first. Graham Sacrison, Community Representative.
Okay, our representative from Olympia, please.
Danny Madrown with the Olympia City Council.
I'm not seeing Tumwater yet. I'll keep my eye open for them.
Pete's here.
Oh,
Pete,
I'm
come
sorry. Sorry, there you are. Pete, would you like to introduce yourself?
I always try to not get attention for myself. Pete Komet, Mayor of Tumwater, representing Tumwater.
Thurston County,
Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner.
City of Rainier,
Ron Kemp, City of Rainier, City Council.
City of Tenino,
Eleanor Callahan, representing the great city of Tenino.
let's see. Do we have a representative from Yelm? Okay, I don't see the tribes. North Thurston Public School,
Deanna Maddox, North Thurston Public Schools Transportation.
Inner City Transit,
Don Melnick, Inner City Transit Authority.
Port of Olympia,
Joe Downing, representing the Great Port of Olympia, and somehow I got double booked, so I'll be through most of the meeting, but not the whole meeting. Thanks.
our state government rep,
Kevin Dragon, I represent the Department of Enterprise Services.
Department of Transportation,
John Winans, the Olympic Region Administrator.
you said you had Joanne with you, or is she?
And
off?
I've got Joanne Schuler with me, and we're looking for Stan to join us. But as I said, we've got rather severe internet problems today.
Our business rep, Renee.
Renee Sinclair, business rep.
And then our other community rep, Kevin, I think that's you on the phone.
Yes, Kevin Festinger, community representative.
Okay, that's all I have for the policy board. I do see someone in attendees with their hand up, so I'm going to let them in to see if they're a policy board member. Oh, wait, Kevin, that seems to be you.
That was me. I'm not sure how I got in as an attendee, but I was raising my hand so you could take me off of mute,
Okay, I'll move
which
you
you
in.
did.
Okay. Okay.
You ready for staff, Vina?
Yes.
Okay. From Intercity Transit, we have Eric Phillips. From Thurston County, Matt Unselman. From WashDOT, we have Stan Suchan. From TRPC, we've got myself, I'm the director, Mark Daly, our deputy, Vina Tabbitt, Berlina Lucas, Dave Reed, Veronica Jarvis, Aiden Dixon, Karen Parkhurst, and Paul Brewster. I believe that is all the staff in attendance.
Berlina, could you please see if you can move the attendees into the meeting? I don't seem to have permissions this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't Kevin for some reason, but I can Karen and Chris.
All right, well, we'll just let Kevin talk from the attendees. Sorry for that technical glitch. Thank you.
And with, there you go.
Chair, I think we're ready for
Yes.
the executive director's report and announcements when
Go
you're
for
ready.
it.
Okay, just a couple of quick things. We've got our commute trip reduction survey out to all the major work sites in the Thurston region. So anything you can do to help get the word out for employees to take the commute trip reduction survey. We've got about 5,000 responses to date, but we're looking to amp that up quite a bit. So anything you can do to help would be awesome. And really good piece of news for us. We've talked a lot in the past about the importance of obligating on time and how that could result in increased funding for us. This is not completely solid yet, but we've met with WashDOT and this is looking pretty close to how it's going to be. We are looking to likely get a little over 1.5 million in redistributed funds from other states. But also this is the first year that WashDOT has applied the sanction part of the obligation policy. And so other parts of the state that didn't use their funding on time, those funds were sanctioned and distributed to entities that did meet their obligation target on time, and we're in that, and so we'll be looking to program an additional 1.5 million this year. Great news. A little bit of a challenge, which we'll talk about in the future, because we're going to want to get some projects off our contingency list likely up and running to hit this target, but it's awesome news to have more money to program. That's what I've got, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved, John O'Callaghan.
Second, Don Melnick.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye or sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next up is approval of meeting notes from October 13th,
Move approval.
2021. Got a motion
This is Pete, second.
and got a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We're now at the public comment period, and I know we have one participant, and so can we switch to Karen if she's gonna do it live?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for taking public comment. In your agenda packet, you received a memo from the Thurston Thrives Community Design Action Team. We are a part of the Thurston Thrives countywide health improvement effort that I hope you're familiar with. Our team is made up of public and private volunteers, and we're working to make active transportation safe and convenient in our community. The recent closure of the Chehalis Western Trail inspired quite a bit of discussion at our action group meetings. We concluded that there's a need for policies surrounding planning and communications for closures of the regional multi-use trails. These include the Karen Fraser Woodland Trail, the Chehalis Western, and the Yelm, Rainier, and Tenino trails. These trails are heavily used and really well loved, as you know. They're important transportation routes, and they support real healthy activity for people of all ages and types and abilities. We believe the Transportation Board should develop recommendations for jurisdictions on how to manage and communicate future trail closures and other disruptions that might happen. The memo you received summarizes our recommendations and gives an example from the Denver area. We request that the Transportation Policy Board refer this to the Technical Advisory Committee to develop these policy and guidance, to develop policy and guidance on this topic. That discussion, of course, should include consultation with staff who directly work with the maintenance and repairs and management of our trail system, which includes parks and recreation staff at the jurisdictions. We'd be happy to provide a representative to participate in those discussions. And I hope you have a chance to review our memo in more detail if you haven't already. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Karen. Well put. I believe there is no one else making live comment. Do we have anything we need to read into the record?
Mr. Chair, this is Pete. I was wondering if we could either, I'd like to see us ask the TAC to take on this issue. I don't know if we need a formal motion or if you want to talk about this later in the meeting. But this seems like a pretty straightforward request to me.
This is not an action item on our agenda, but you can certainly direct staff to work on this with the TAC.
I think that's appropriate.
Well, I'll just say, so I am part of this action group, but I also am a user of the trail. And for those of you that aren't familiar, when the piece of trail near East Olympia Elementary School, there was a piece of the trail closed for a salmon, for a culvert replacement project for salmon. And frankly, the notice was very confusing. It made it sound like the whole trail was closed for the entire summer initially. It was very confusing to users. And so I think that it got clarified over time, but only because questions were asked about the staff and eventually changes were made. So I do think this is timely and appropriate. The trail is getting to the point where we know some significant maintenance activity is going to have to occur, repaving and projects like we just saw. So it seems like some kind of regional recommended policy on how the public gets notified would be entirely appropriate. So I would, given that background, I'd like to move that we request the Technical Advisory Committee to work on policy or guidance in consultation with the staff responsible for the maintenance and repairs of the regional trail system, including the Parks and Rec staff.
Second.
Thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded.
Many times.
Yeah, another time. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. And so
Thank
we
you.
will issue that directive. Thanks, Pete. Next up is the WSDOT Olympic Region new facility and headquarters remote work policy. And Karen, are you taking the lead with John?
Yeah, I'm going to introduce John and talk a little bit about the work that they've done. I'm also going to introduce Stan Suchan, who is also from the DOT headquarters. And as you know, Veronica and I and others have been working on Capitol Campus telework and encouraging telework in other parts of the region, providing support and the like. And the Olympic region, Veronica has had a chance to visit the new building. I have not yet, but basically today we're going to hear two things. One is policy from Stan that talks about the aggressive program that the Secretary of Transportation has put in place with aggressive goals for the percentage of people teleworking. And then John is going to be talking to us and walking us through what their new building looks like, which is set up to be the workplace of the future, which I think I've been hearing about since the 70s. So maybe this really is the workplace of the future. I hope there's no paper there because we were also promised the paperless office. So I'm going to turn it over to the DOT people. Thank you for being here today, especially with your technical concerns, and go for it.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. And So as Karen said, Stan is going to start out the presentation and talk about our overall telework initiative department-wide. Stan is leading our telework transformation initiative at headquarters, done an amazing job, done a lot of work. And so I'm going to turn it immediately over to Stan. I know we're a little short potentially on time because I could talk about this all morning. So Stan, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. And thank you for having me in a way where I did not have to spend 3 hours on I-5 to meet with you. I live and work here in Seattle, though I am at WSDOT's headquarters. So why don't we go to the next slide? So before COVID, if you can take yourself back to that time, why don't we move to the next slide? Thank you.
There we go.
Before COVID, WSDOT was working with TRPC, King County Metro, and other state agencies to kind of increase telework. And we had a lot of executive support. We actually had a lot of support from employees who were interested, and there was some middle management resistance, which was typical of big organizations pre-COVID. And then during COVID, we kind of had a keystone event that forced us to telework, and very quickly, middle managers figured out they could make this work much more than some of them thought before COVID. So we have a lot of support at all levels of the agency, and that has not been a barrier for us. So that's great. One of the things that folks quickly realized is that performance-based management, something we've all worked on for decades, is something we need to continue to work on and get better at. That managing by looking over people's shoulders is not realistic, does not work. And telework just kind of forces you to really work on other ways to work together and to manage employees. And then we did have a strong foundation from a bunch of existing programs, some of which led by TRPC and others. Next slide, please. So COVID hit. We decided, you know what, we're learning a lot here. We can continue to do this after COVID, whenever that will be. So we set ourselves some goals. So in front of you, you see our performance goals. That's our post-COVID vision, though certainly doing these things during COVID are something we're pursuing. And you will notice that they are very worker-centered. That is how this will work for us. If workers and supervisors are on board, then we can make this happen. Next slide, please. So we developed a performance benchmark, and you will notice, if you remember those objectives were about productivity, about service, about employee recruitment and retention. This benchmark does not reflect all of those things. We're going to measure and are doing some measurement of those things, but to help center the effort, we set ourselves a pretty ambitious benchmark, 30 to 40%. If you hear the secretary talk about this, he will only mention the 40%. He is ambitious, and we're going to try to reach that ambition. But as you can see, we have a big number of employees who just can't telework. Maintenance workers, people who work on ferry boats. So for those of us who work in offices, it's a pretty, it will be 3 or 4 days a week. We developed this using survey results and anecdotal information and engagement. So this was developed, this isn't just somebody making a policy decision, it's a combination of policy and data analytics to come to this benchmark. The other thing I want to mention is that we're currently with the mandate at 47%. And we're measuring that on a daily basis, and that is available to you and the public if you want to take a peek and see how we're doing. Next slide, please. All right, so one of the ways we developed this was some surveys, and I wanted to just share one bit of information from you. There's a lot of employee interest in teleworking. We've done 2 rounds of surveys. That interest went up as the pandemic continued. We haven't done a survey very recently, but anecdotally, we're not hearing change from employees other than the fact that mandated telework full-time is not ideal. They would like to interact with their coworkers once in a while. And, we won't really, people can't figure out that balance of telework and in office until we actually try it. And since the mandate's still in place, we haven't done that yet. Next slide, please. So after we set our benchmark, we changed a bunch of policies. And what you're seeing in front of you are our guiding principles. And then since then, we've worked to make those into policies through things like our telework manual, which is a new document. But as you can see, it's really voluntary for employees, but not for supervisors. If the job duties can be done from home, and if the employee wants to work from home, they should be able to. And so we believe we can hit that benchmark without mandating telework for employees, where we can give employees the choice. We, of course, will figure that out when we test it and then make adjustments either to the benchmark or to the policies to achieve that benchmark. But again, remember, we're centered around employee productivity, employee satisfaction, recruitment, and retention. So the decisions we make will be centered around those things, not achieving the benchmark at any cost. We also know, if you would go to the next slide, more policies for you to look at, that we have something wrong. I wish I could tell you what it is we have wrong, but this is behavioral science. And so we're going to test these things out, we're going to learn, and we're ready to adapt once we start learning what we got wrong about our policies and our practices. Next slide, please. Okay, so here, this has been a statewide collaborative effort. We've had hundreds of employees involved throughout the state, which has been pretty cool. With technology advancing, people can give a little bit of time and can be anywhere in the state and participate. We've also had people who this is more central to their job, like me, where we've given a lot of time. But you can see this has been an agile inspired report for those of you, effort for those of you who are familiar with technology development. That's kind of a learn as you go approach. And we've experimented with that for this project, which is not primarily a technology project, but have learned a lot about that. And that has worked really well for us so that people could participate and actively shape. I will also tell you that we made some policy decisions that delighted and surprised me through this process, where employees really shaped this. And if I was a betting man in Vegas, I wouldn't have bet on some of our policies being changed in the way they were. And employees and executives worked together and made those changes happen. Last slide, please. Last for me. All right. Lots of other specific things that we have worked through as an agency. So if you have a particular interest, I'm sticking around for questions. But first, I want to encourage you to explore the new Olympic Region headquarters and give a pitch that we have 2 other locations that have made similar transformations in downtown Seattle. The former Washington State Ferries headquarters is now a consolidated space for multiple WSDOT groups. And in Shoreline, the Northwest Region headquarters have similarly. So what you're seeing in Olympic Region has been happening elsewhere in the state. John, you're up next. Show us the good stuff.
Well, Stan, that was impressive. So we do want to leave room for questions. This is an aerial view of the new complex just completed. It's striking in how much asphalt you see. To me, the first time when I started seeing this, we also in the top of the picture above so what you're looking at is the shops building in the foreground, the office building in the sort of top center, the smaller building. Over past the office building, all that green space, the trees, we own that property as well. And so we have a detention pond there. We have a green space section on part of that property. And so what that property looks like in the future is sort of unknown at this time, but there's a lot of parking here because we do a lot of vehicle maintenance. We do vehicle maintenance for our headquarters building. We build vehicles for other DOT offices across the state. And so there's a lot of need for vehicles to come and go and be parked, and whether they're awaiting service or they're out of service for a season or something like that. So we started planning this complex many years ago. And as it developed over the last, say, 5 or 6 years, it went through a lot of iterations. And I'm speaking in particular about the office building at this point. The office building started out as a very standard. We have the legislation to build this complex stipulated that the funding was to construct a new campus in this location to replace all but only the employees and operations that were happening in Tumwater at the time. And so we had about 190 employees that would be moved into a new office building at this location. And so we started designing a facility that would accommodate those 190 employees, essentially in combination of offices and cubicles. And as we developed and learned more about the modern workplace, all pre-COVID, we started to transition our thinking about, well, what is a more
Mr. Chair, it looks like we might have lost them completely.
Yeah.
Jan, are you able to take over, or should we move on to our next agenda item?
Anne, can you walk through this?
I think I'm back.
Oh, here he is. Yeah.
Okay.
I made it back somehow. We did a lot of redesign work. What I did was the presentation. So Vina, can you go to the next slide that says first floor plan?
Yep.
Thank you. So we ended up designing a floor plan that was very flexible, was designed around a mobile workplace. You can see I've swiped some colors on here. On the right of that floor plan, there's a green line that indicates that that's where the large conference rooms that you are going to see in a minute. They're over there to the right of that green line. They're part of the building, but the little blue boxes to the left of that green line, those are secure points. And so you need a badge to get through those doors. And the idea is when you come in the main door entrance to the building, we can hold public meetings, we can hold evening meetings. You can come in the front door, move through and on to the right without needing secure access. The little red box, there are restrooms there. They're all gender neutral, single occupant rooms. And so we can hold public meetings. People have access to restrooms, to the conference rooms. And so it's meant to be a flexible space. On the left, there's a light blue box. We're going to talk about that going forward. That's called a commons area. And you can see that there are workspaces on the top part of the plan and on the bottom part of the plan. And that commons area connects those two spaces. So
Uh-oh.
Chair, I'm going to suggest that we maybe move on to the next agenda item. Oh, he's back again.
Oh.
all right, I'm getting a message that our internet may be back up. So let's try this one more time before we maybe move this
Okay.
forward.
We can see your video now, so it does look like you maybe have a better connection right now.
Yeah, I think Joanne's here. She said, I think you're back live. So, so you can see there's, I was just talking about the commons area. Along the top of the floor plan, you can see workstations and conference rooms and whatnot. And along the bottom of the plan, there similarly are workstations and conference rooms. And that light blue area that's circled is a commons area, and it connects those two workstation areas. So you don't have to walk. It's a space where you can go through the core of the building. So Stan, can you go to, I'm sorry, can we go to the next slide, please? Stan, you're not running that, are you? So one of the principles here is that there are no assigned workstations in this building. You do not have an assigned cubicle. We had a lot of pushback. Where am I going to put the picture of my dog and my mom and my family if I don't have my own cubicle? Well, you can pack it with you, but we're encouraging you to be mobile in the building. For instance, if you come in the first thing in the morning and the first thing you have is a meeting for 2 hours in one of our conference rooms, there's no need to put all your stuff in a cubicle and then go to a conference room, the conference room. And so these pictures show that the picture on the left is one of a half dozen locations where we have lockers. Every employee in the building who does not have an office has an assigned locker for their things. And on the right, there's a picture of those little pedestals, and they all live in these little storage areas, and everybody is assigned a pedestal. And so when you come into work, you can put some of your stuff in your locker, but you can also go and get your pedestal and move that to a workstation or pull things out of it that you need. Everybody in the building has now been assigned a laptop computer. So there are virtually no desktop computers in this building. Everybody has also been assigned a wireless keyboard and a wireless mouse. And so you do not have to share a keyboard. All of the docking stations at workstations have been standardized. So some of those workstations have single monitors, some have dual. So you can come in the morning. If you want to work at a workstation, you can get we had concerns about, well, I don't want to use somebody's dirty old keyboard. Well, you don't have to. You have your own, and it lives in your pedestal when you're not using it. And so we have numerous small huddle rooms, small conference rooms. We have a series of big conference rooms that I'm going to talk about in a minute. We have a fitness room that we have some donated equipment. Somebody had a bicycle that they didn't need to store their clothes on anymore. So we're going to bring it in and put it in the fitness room. We have we have at least 2 bathrooms on each floor that have changing tables. And we also have in them, and upstairs, we also have a wellness room that has a comfy chair and a sink and some storage and a refrigerator. And so it's completely set up. It's in a nice quiet section of the building as well. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is I just have some typical pictures of some work areas around the building. You can see this picture there. There are some filing cabinets there with a big countertop. We have very few filing areas. We do have some organizations that have retained some of their paper files, but we don't have very many. So there's rolling whiteboards over there by the window that you can pull around. There are some workstations that you can see there. But again, if we go to the next slide, this is a picture of the commons area. There's one on each floor, as I mentioned. Those diner style booths are meant for conversations. You can eat your lunch there. We have a policy that you cannot eat at the workstations out in those work areas. I characterize it as, I'm not interested in smelling your Kung Pao chicken or your leftover cabbage that you had for dinner. And we don't need people essentially eating at those workstations. We want to keep them clean. And so there are these areas as well as a lunchroom that I'll talk about shortly. Down one side of this commons area, there are a couple of microwaves. There's a sink, there's some coffee makers, there's a refrigerator. On the other side, there are printers. There's a printer, there's recycle, there's office supplies. We've also standardized all of our office supplies. Instead of every organization having their own collection of office supplies, there are office supplies on each floor. The printers are set up with a system called PaperCut, where if I send something to a printer, it is not printed until I go with my badge, swipe my badge, and it releases my job. So you don't have a buildup of things that are printed, and there's some privacy for printing. We are seeing that we have moved quickly away from paper. I have not actually printed a document in over a year and a half. And so we are moving that way. Can we go to the next slide, please? So continuing to look at some typical work areas, again, the workstations, all the workstations have adjustable sit-stand tables as part of them. So you can choose to sit, you can choose to stand. We have little places that you can sit and work. The high top table there, you can see, is just another example of a potential work area space. We have a lot of good natural light, except for a few on the first floor. All the offices are in the core of the building. We have cut the number of offices, private offices, in half from what we had before. So we've congregated the work areas around the outside where the natural light is. That light can reach in across the workstations. The partitions have glass on top so that more light can get through and by them. So there's a lot of really positives about this layout. Next slide, please. So this is an example of an area we have up on the second floor that we call the gathering space. You can come in, you can sit and talk through the double doors. You see there's actually a small deck that we will put a few chairs out on. This is up on the second floor. So you can come in here and work. And this is just an example of another option we've given people to come in and not plunk themselves at a cubicle. Find a place if just two people want to chat. If you don't need something real quiet, you can sit here. If you do, you can go to a huddle room or a small conference room. And all the small conference rooms and all the offices are the same size. They're all 10 by 12 feet. I'm sitting in my office here today. It's 10 by 12 feet. They're all interchangeable. We've already done that once. We swapped out an office for a conference room due to location. In the future, we can do that for all of these spaces. It's meant to be very flexible. So next slide, please. This is our computer training room, and it doubles as our emergency operations center. Matter of fact, for the Great Shakeout, we use this room for the Great Shakeout. There's a little space for the person who's controlling a lot of the systems there in the middle. And then there's a horseshoe shape, as you can see. We've got lots of monitors, and it's adjacent to a couple of small conference rooms and a couple of offices, so that, and to our public information office, so that in the end of a big event, we can run everything from this area here. And when we don't need it for an EOC, it doubles as a training room. So we've tried to make the most efficient use we can of all our spaces. Many of them do double duty. Next slide, please. This is a picture of a typical small conference room. There's room for 4, 5, 6 people to sit around a table. There's a monitor. We have owls for all these rooms. We were using an owl yesterday. For those, I think most of you may have heard by now, but an owl is a little tower device about 14 inches tall. It's got a bunch of cameras on the top and speakers and microphones, and you put it in the middle of that table, and it scans the whole room. As you're in a conference, it picks up who's talking and brings them onto the camera. It shows the room as a whole. It's a great tool for hybrid meetings. And so we have 2 or 3 owls that you can check out from the front desk and set up and use for a conference in one of these small rooms. So next slide. This is a view of our large conference space. This is the space that we can use for large meetings, conferences. I think in standing room sort of configuration, it's rated at about 300 people. Now that's all 3 rooms. What you're looking at here is in the distance, you can see one partition still not folded away. In the distance is our primary large conference room. There's several large monitors. There's a state-of-the-art system to control the AV equipment. You can kind of see just to the left of the monitor with the camera on it, there's a little blue pad, and there's another one in the room on the left. That little blue pad controls all the AV equipment in the room. You can tell it you want to use your own computer. You can tell it you want to use the room computer. You can tell it you want to use other connection methods that are available. You can tell it that you're only using that room in the background, only that room. You can tell it you're going to use both rooms, and so everything will be reflected in all the screens. And then there's a third room that we're going to get to in a second. So essentially we can open 2 sets of partitions and create one very large conference space that is all connected and all controlled from one point. We've used it for training sessions already. It works really well. So next slide, please. This is a view of half of that third room. You can see the monitor hanging in the corner, and there's the camera system as part of the, it recognizes, again, who's talking, and will focus on speakers and all sorts of other magical stuff. And through the windows, that is our outdoor seating area. Because if we go to the next slide, this room we're looking at now, this is the same room we were just looking at. It's also our lunchroom. And so you can close the partitions and maintain this as a lunchroom. There's access to the outdoor space. And you can leave the other 2 rooms as a big single room. You can close the partitions. So it's very, very flexible. And then last slide is my final photo. This is our back employee entrance. It leads out to the employee parking. You can see a couple of bicycles there. We own those. The region purchased those for employees to check out. We have bicycles and a couple bikes, and we have some bicycle helmets. We have this little section of indoor parking. We also have covered outdoor bicycle parking at this building and at the shops building. We wanted to have solid bicycle parking so we could support our bicycle commute program well into the future. It's been created in accordance with guidance on the Association of Bicycle and Pedestrian Professionals Essentials. We wanted to make sure we had parking that worked. We also got an agency policy change that would not have permitted us to install electric bike charging stations or charging ability at our bicycle parking because we don't spend money to facilitate employees' personal benefits. But in reality, it's a CTR initiative, it's a healthy initiative, it's a climate change initiative. And the policymakers quickly agreed, and we will be providing electric bike charging here as well. So we're pretty proud of all of that. And for the last slide, I'd like to run a short video. I'll explain that our communications office partnered with our virtual engineering resource group at headquarters. They do a lot of our video work, and we created a video that would kind of celebrate the site and introduce it to policymakers, legislators, the public, our employees. So it's only a few minutes long, but I'd like to run it, and then Stan and I can take questions. So.
Did it crash, Vina?
No.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize this was coming and I need to share a different screen.
Okay.
So let me do that. And I also need to share sound with this. All right, can you see that?
Yep.
Yes.
At the Washington State Department of Transportation Olympic Region, we keep the state moving. We're moving as well into the future. The new Olympic Region Maintenance and Administration Facility in Lacey is serving those who serve Washington. Sustainable multimodal transportation is a core value at WashDOT, and that core value is reflected in our new home. It's an investment for operations. And WashDOT employees who serve. A modern work environment for today's needs, designed to attract new talent to agency service, reduce the environmental impact, and support health and wellness. Built to reflect the changing expectations of the work environment, giving employees multiple choices of where to work, collaborate, meet, or recharge. Amenities for infants at work, inclusive bathrooms, loaner bicycles and bicycle parking, outdoor gathering spaces, a LEED rating for energy efficiency, a modernized shop building for the materials testing lab, radio shop, and signals, custom lockers to help store and protect gear, a vehicle maintenance building that's designed to meet the needs of today's fleet and beyond. TEF experts have the tools to get the job done with heavy-duty repair bays. Break rooms that double as meeting spaces. A backup generator to keep everything powered. Creating efficiencies so we can get the job done. The new Olympic Region Maintenance and Administration Facility, built to serve those who serve Washington.
So the last, thank you, Lena. So the last thing I'll mention, and then we'll take questions, is that there was a few things that were not included in the original contract because of cost. The legislature funded those in the last session, and so we will have installation of what I would call state-of-the-art fuel island. Right now, we had a fuel island in Tumwater. And so they will be constructing that sometime next summer. They also will be adding solar panels to the building so that we will have solar power to the facility. The facility has been built to very high LEED standards. And so the solar power will really enhance that LEED rating as well. So it's the right thing to do. And so those are a couple of things. There's also a radio tower to go in because we still use radios for our crews to communicate in the field extensively. And so there's a few more things coming, but essentially it's done. We're anxious to move in. We just now did receive the okay to go to 25% occupancy in the office building. We're not quite ready to have people come rushing in yet. We're making sure we know who's coming when, but all accounts are that the majority of our employees at this building are still want to telework at least or more than 3 days a week. So we're looking at ways to reduce our footprint in other places and bring people in here, give them the ability to use this as a drop-in center. So there's lots more coming, but we're excited. This facility is light years ahead of our old home. And so we're all getting used to it. And Pete, we miss you in Tumwater, but we're getting settled in our new home. So thank you.
Are there any questions? Yes.
This is Don. Obviously, one reason you did this was the cost. Do you know how much kinds of cost reduction you achieved by going to this, and what other benefits? I mean, efficiency, but also cost reduction, I presume, is one thing you tried.
Yeah, we did. There was through the history of the project, you know, there was estimates that were up in the $70 million range for the facility. We received 50. And so the original design was a $70 million facility. And we actually, the first thing we did was we scaled down the size of the office building significantly. You know, this building is probably 30% smaller than the designs that we were looking at originally. And so, and it came in, the contract bid was $49 million. And we received another 4, I think it was, from the legislature. So we're right in that sort of low $50 million range for what originally was more like a middle 70s.
And you sort of brushed over the whole thing about culture change. I mean, that had to be a big part of this, and it sounded like many employees were really in favor of this. But what about supervisors who were used to looking over the shoulder? I think that was the term used. How did you get around that? Yeah, and Stan can speak to that maybe statewide a little bit, but in the Olympic region, it's hard to even say this, but the one good thing that I'm reaching for out of the COVID stay home, whatever, is it's been shown this can work, and it does work. I mean, it was forced on us, but it's been such a learning experience that we've got supervisors. My boss, many of you know Kevin, my boss was you can't telework and get your work done. You can't telework, and Winans, your schedule is you work as a 6/10s, and you're available on the 7th day. But he's now, I mean, he's got it. I mean, many managers get it now. It's doable, and it's a big culture change. And we've got employees who are very happy working from home and productive. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm really excited for you. You guys are doing the right thing, I believe in. Thank
Thanks for
you.
the presentation.
Other questions?
This is Pete. First of all, just what an exciting thing to see. Look forward to seeing it live and in person at some point here, but really, really an amazing thing. So I guess I have to ask the question, what about the current facility in Tumwater? What's the plans there? I see there are still trucks parked there. What's up?
Yeah, we've had, I've worked with John Doan quite a bit. John and I have conversations about the Tumwater facility. We have to go through a process now that our facilities group is leading on doing a site investigation. What I tongue in cheek, I say, it's been a vehicle maintenance facility for over 80 years. What possibly could be?
Yeah.
What possibly could go awry in that situation. So they got a lot of testing to do, soil testing and whatnot. And ultimately we will sell the property. And we've been talking with Tumwater about Tumwater's interest in purchasing the property. As the local agency, I think you are at the top of the list, and those conversations with John have been ongoing and trying to keep him up to date. We also have an agreement with the Tumwater PD. We signed, in the realities of today's world, we signed an agreement with Tumwater PD saying that they do not need our permission to go on the property if they see something, suspicious. And so we have had some vehicles parked there. Fish and Wildlife asked us if they could park some vehicles there on and off. We've had a few folks ask us for that, and we've been allowing it. Some level of activity is probably good there just to keep it, appearing that, it's being used. And so we've said, fine, we have shut off our network. There is no computer network running there anymore. We do not have, our badge system is not active. And so our employees can't go. We just said was, we don't want you to be able to go in there and shop for used furniture. It's been closed up, locked up. Tumwater PD's signed the agreement with us and been very gracious about that. And they're interested in the same thing as we are, is just making sure that the site stays secure.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
And all I can say is, wow, the new facility looks amazing. And when the opportunity comes to take a look, I'll be anxiously outside the door.
Well, and this group is of course welcome anytime. If you would like to come and see the facility, we can make that happen. If you want to come and have a hybrid policy board meeting in the conference room, we can make that happen. We are open at 7 a.m.
Okay. Okay. With that, we probably need to move on. Next up is the state of our system, safety, and Aiden Dixon.
And just to let Aiden know that he should go ahead and do his full presentation, because we can jam together the rest of the items on the agenda. So
yeah,
sounds good. Thanks, Karen. Hello, everyone. Hello, Policy Board. My name is Aiden Dixon. I'm a planner here at the Thurston Regional Planning Council. And today I want to talk to you a little bit more about what we call state of our system, but it's related to transportation safety. I'm going to share my screen and get started. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay. Great. So here's our agenda. We'll begin with a very brief overview of federal transportation safety funding, generally speaking, in Washington's Target Zero. I know I'm speaking to the experts here, but just a little brief overview just to give a little context to when we dive into the more data heavy parts of the presentation later. Next, we'll look at some transportation safety performance measure data trends, specifically looking in our county and then also statewide. And as well as we're going to be looking at data trends related to road users and high risk activities on the roadway. So we've got some performance measure data to look at. And then we've also got some crash data related to the types of people that are going to be using the road, and then also kinds of high risk activities that may be in play when these crashes occur. We've got some time allotted for questions at the end. This is intended to be a discussion though, so feel free to interrupt me at any time. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to stop and answer them if anything's unclear or if you're curious about anything like that. So let's start with a very brief overview of how roadway safety is funded and set up on a federal level. So we've got the Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP. It's a big federal program. It allows states and the local governments within the states to target safety funds to their most critical safety needs. The HSIP requires a data-driven strategic approach to improving highway safety on all public roads with a specific focus on performance, right? It consists of three main components, which you can kind of see here. The Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which is that blue piece. In Washington, it's called Target Zero. We've also got a state HSIP, so there's a federal HSIP, and then the state also has its own HSIP or program of highway safety improvement projects. That's that gray piece right there. And then we've also got some other ones that aren't really relevant to this conversation right now, but the Railway Highway Crossing Program, and also we've got some high risk rural roads program as well, which are relevant to Washington, but not relevant to this discussion. So generally speaking, that is how the HSIP program is set up. Now, to obligate the funds, states have to develop, implement, and update a state highway safety program, which is Target Zero in Washington. Its most recent edition was in 2019. That was a fifth version since 2000. So the Target Zero has been real since for 21 years now. It's a long time. It's almost we got 2 decades of Target Zero. It's more important now than ever, I would say, just because the data that we're going to be looking at, you all are probably very familiar with this already, but Washington State's traffic fatality and serious injury trend is going in the wrong direction. It's increasing compared with the prior period. We've experienced a steady increase in Washington State in terms of people that are getting injured and killed on the roadway. My personal experience and professional experience is I'm from Illinois and Chicago. I worked at the NPO in the Chicagoland area, and we experienced the same issue, steadily rising traffic fatalities and serious injuries. This is also a trend that is happening nationwide as well. So Washington is not alone. And unfortunately, this is something that you're seeing not only in every state, most states across the country, but also generally speaking across the country as well. So they know this, or at least Washington State Department of Transportation, they know this. We all know this. So how do we kind of address these issues? That's a very good question. So one of the things that they put in is to Target Zero, this edition is called a safe system approach to roadway safety. This differs from conventional safety practices by attempting to be more human-centered. So like you're seeking safety through a more aggressive use of vehicle or roadway designs, or maybe operational changes, rather than relying primarily on trying to address behavioral changes. So distracted driving, we'll be talking about that a little bit. Impaired driving, these are all behavioral changes that, have some space to, go down. There are engagement activities and kind of informational campaigns, enforcement, all these things we can think of that can address those kinds of issues. However, I think better design of roadways is something that maybe is not as looked at as seriously sometimes, or taken as much time to be looked at in its relation to how it can impact in a positive way safety on the roadway. So that is new in Target Zero for 2019, that safe system approach, which I think is pretty important to think about. So let's talk about generally speaking, the federal safety performance measures that the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration have come up with to measure. So we are required as an MPO to establish and report safety targets for 5 performance measures that are listed here. Performance measures, generally just indicators that enable decision makers like yourselves, along with other stakeholders, to monitor changes in system conditions and performance against established visions like our Vision Zero. So we've got our number of fatalities, our rate per 100 million or vehicle miles traveled. We've got our raw count of serious injuries, and then also the 4th one is a rate of those serious injuries. And then finally, we have a number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries. So we're talking about bicycle and pedestrian folks that are on the roadway for number 5. These are the safety performance measures that have been tracked. Now we're going to start jumping into the data. We'll start with number 1, the number of fatalities. Right here, you're looking at Thurston County's performance on the top and Washington State's performance on the bottom. The raw count of fatalities is those numbers that are listed over the years on the bottom. You've got the 5-year rolling average in black right here. And then you've got these numbers that are essentially what we would need to meet if we were to get on track to reaching the target zero goal. As you can see, unfortunately, the numbers are going in the wrong direction. We are experiencing a slow but steady trend upwards, both statewide and in Thurston County. We'll move on to our second measure. We're looking at a rate now. So adjusting for vehicle miles traveled within each county, we can still see that Thurston County and Washington State are experiencing a pretty slow and steady increase in the number of traffic fatalities on the roadway. Last year, our performance measure benchmark was, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we did not meet our performance measure benchmark last year, and it's likely that we will not meet it again this year either. Let's move on to a raw count of serious injuries. The story unfortunately remains the same. Within Thurston County and statewide, we are experiencing a steady increase in the number of serious injuries on the roadway as well. And then when you adjust that, here's the 4th measure. When you adjust that for rates, it still bears out the trend is a slow and steady increase. It's not as thankfully it's not as steep as some other states or some other municipalities or counties, but we are seeing it not decrease in the way that we want it to. So. And now finally, we'll move on to our 5th measure, which is our non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries. A little bit more variable. However, the story remains generally the same. We're looking at not a decrease. With statewide, the numbers are a little higher just because it's the entire state. So the trend is a little less variable, but generally speaking, the fatality rate or fatality count for non-motorists are not going down. Now we're going to move on to, like I said before, those were performance benchmarks that were established by, or performance measures rather, that were established by the federal government. Now we're going to be looking at some data that was provided to us by the Washington State Traffic Commission and analyzed by TRPC to get a better picture of what's happening both in Thurston County and statewide with regards to kind of like different typologies of people that are using the roadway that are involved in fatal crashes in Thurston County and in the state. So right now we're looking at Thurston County's data over the past 9 years for different categories of high-risk behavior. So we've got distraction, impairment, that could be alcohol or drugs, speeding, unrestrained vehicle occupants, people that aren't putting their seatbelts on, and then our totals. So it's not very important to look at these percentages. I would direct your attention to these kind of graphs that are showing trends over the past 10 years. As you can see, The numbers are pretty variable. Thurston County actually, our overall, we're dealing with a lot of these counts are less than 10. So it goes up and down a lot. However, when you chart these data over a long period of time, trends do become a little bit more apparent. I would just caution anyone who might want to use these. I can provide these after the presentation, but with the low amount of actual overall fatalities, feel free to use these in any kind of presentation or conversation that you may have, but I would just caution the amount of conclusions that might be able to be drawn. Like I said before, as the time frame moves out farther, as we are able to graph more data, the trends become a little bit more apparent. However, just a word of caution advised, just to how much we can conclude from these data. As we can see, impairment is a slow and steady increase here. That bears out in the state. We'll look at that the next slide. Distraction and driving is decreasing, but generally speaking, I would say most of these categories are experiencing an increase. And then overall, obviously, we've got increases in overall fatalities. We'll move to the state now. The Thurston County generally tracks very similarly to trends on the state level as well. Some counties do not, or some MPO jurisdictions do not. Thurston County, however, generally does. It's like maybe there's only one category that is not does not track. We'll get to that a little bit later. However, it's important just for this slide to understand that Washington State is also experiencing pretty steady and sustained increases in a lot of these categories. Speeding kind of plateaus a little bit, and also distracted driving less obviously up. However, impairment increasing, especially in 2020. We've probably all read those articles that came out last year about driving behavior during the pandemic and how folks were more likely to drive impaired and speed as well. These kind of dangerous behaviors on the roadway during the pandemic are kind of bearing out in the data, which is pretty interesting. Now we'll look at road user kind of categories. We'll move from risk behaviors to types of people that are on the roadway. We've got heavy trucks involved, motorcyclists, older drivers, walkers and bicyclists, and then we've got younger drivers as well. So this is Thurston County over the past 10 years. As you can see, again, the story very similar. We've got pretty steady increases in all of these categories. These increases, if you look at it, are pretty minor because at least with, look at all these, we've only gotten 3 or 4 older drivers that have been involved in fatal accidents. However, like I said before, the data over a longer period of time does show a generally increasing trend. Younger drivers going down. However, everything else we're seeing an increase in. This compared to Washington State, which is generally seeing an increase overall in every category that's listed here. Now, that was a lot of information and data, and I know that it's hard to kind of put it in your head when making these comparisons. So I just want to direct your attention to these kind of side-by-sides of high-risk behavior statewide on the left, and then Thurston County on the right. As you can see, what I said before generally holds up. We're seeing increases, and also Thurston County tracks very similarly to the trends that are experienced statewide as well.
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is John O'Callaghan. Would you attribute these increases, especially over the last 10 years, because of population growth in the state and Thurston County?
I would say it has something to do with it. However, if you look at, I would say that this is my gut, if you were to normalize these by VMT or some kind of measure that would allow you to kind of isolate that or control that variable, I would say that wouldn't explain everything. To your point, I think that, the more people that live here, the more accidents and crashes are going to occur. And that does account for some increases in these trends. However, my feeling and that is kind of based on other experiences with other counties and stuff like that, is that the roadways are just generally getting more dangerous, whether that's because people's behavior on the roadway is happening, is changing. And you're definitely right that because more people are on the roadway, it does get more dangerous. But I would say that there's something else about that's kind of contributing to this as well, not just population increases, although that does play a part.
Thank you.
And we'll take a look at road users, statewide and Thurston County, kind of a side by side. As you can see, you know, we're seeing increases in all these categories. Just to get back to that question, I'm thinking about that right now. You know, in Chicago, this is a great example. In the Chicagoland area, we weren't seeing as drastic of a population increase as this area. I believe it was pretty flat. However, fatalities and serious injuries were going up, kind of decoupled from our population growth. So at least in that anecdotal experience, when the data was presented to us, we saw the roadways were getting more dangerous for users, but population wasn't necessarily increasing commensurate to the amount of danger that was increasing. So just a little add on to that.
What do you mean the roadways are getting more dangerous? I might not be thinking the same way you are.
Sure. So I'm thinking, you know, in terms of our behavior on the roadway, that's pretty obvious. So that's kind of was my first point. The people on the roadway are acting or behaving in a more dangerous way. They may be speeding more. They may be driving impaired more. They may be driving distracted more with the, you know, cell phones and distracted driving. You know, that's been an issue for us. Also, I think the design of roadways sometimes does not accurately match the behavior of the people on the roadway. So I'm sure we all know of certain spots in our commutes or something that was like, this is a dangerous intersection or something like that. And I think this is kind of a combination of roadway design and behavior on the roadway is essentially what I would say is making roads more dangerous, but leading to more potentially dangerous conditions on the roadway is what I would say.
Thank you.
No problem.
This is Pete, for the impairment, somewhere in there, and I don't remember the year, marijuana was legalized. Has there been any attempt to look at that versus drinking impairment?
That's a great question. You know, I presented to council last week and I almost got the same question. I have not looked at that. However, it would be interesting to put, and this is probably what I will do when I come back to TPB in the future, is you know, trying to line up some different policy changes that had occurred in the state and kind of in relationship to any kind of change in these numbers. So I have not looked at that, but that is an interesting question, and I can get back to you with more information on that.
Thank you.
Well, after the side-by-side, excuse me, go ahead.
Okay, just a personal observation. I finally bought myself a relatively newer car, and it's got all the electronics and all that kind of good stuff in there. As far as the distracted driving, have you guys looked at cars that have all of that stuff? Because I find myself having to pay a whole lot more attention to the road if just to increase the temperature in my car. It looks really cool and all that stuff, but it is a bit more distracting. Have you guys looked at anything along those lines as well?
We have not looked at that specifically. I would agree with you though, you know, modern vehicles, there's a lot of different things that are going on to distract the driver in terms of not only electronics, but also just like lighting in general. I feel like brighter interiors. That could be an interesting analysis. We got some data with make and models of vehicles and years when available, when collected by the police. It's definitely something that we could take a closer look at.
Thank you.
Well, after this side-by-side is the last piece of data. well, actually, this is the last piece of data. I'm glad that we were able to get into questions because that's all I have for you today. Some future possible analyses, and not just including the ones that were talked about just now from the questions, but I'm thinking putting together some priority areas of things that policymakers should be looking at. There was a lot of data that we just saw, but what's the most important? So I'm looking to put that together in terms of categories that contributed to categories that were present in a fatal or severe accident most often. So stay tuned for that. I'll also be looking at roadway type. So to my point before about designing better roadways or safer roadways, there are specific roadways that are more frequently involved in these types of crashes than others. So going to be looking and doing an analysis of trying to figure out which ones are more present more often, and then trying to see if there's anything that we could do about that. So I'm happy to take any questions at all, or go back to a slide if anyone would like to see something. My email is right here. If you are interested in any of these graphs for your own uses to staff or other policymakers that you engage with, feel free to email me, and I can get that media to you right away. Thank you very much.
Well, if nobody else has one and has anything to ask, I've got one more question. And it ties in a little bit to what I was talking about before with all the electronics that are in the car. We're looking at moving to autonomous vehicles and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Has let's say the 2020, 2021 cars, are they able to communicate with each other to help reduce the amount of accidents that there are, so they know how to keep distance, kind of like a wagon train, that type of deal?
Not currently. That technology, while available, is not present in I would say, the vast majority of cars that are on the road today. We've got what you're referring to as a connected vehicle.
Yes.
So we have a project called Smart Corridors that we're working on with Intercity Transit and a variety of other partners to modernize and implement a lot of this connected technology along major corridors in our area. And when OEMs integrate more of that technology, when it becomes more kind of price effective for consumers, that technology will reduce accidents, just because that is just the science behind the technology. And also it's more importantly from our perspective, the infrastructure will be present to engage with those vehicles when they enter onto the roadway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan, and very interesting. Just a personal observation of my own. I think I'm seeing more speeding than I've ever experienced. And I drive a small truck with a logo for a nonprofit on it. And so I tend to drive the speed limit because I don't want to be a bad example, but then you get run over. So yeah, there is some technology in the newer 21, 22 vehicles that lane centering and and automatic adaptive cruise, but there's a long way to go before you can really trust it all. But thank you very much for a very interesting presentation.
No problem. Thank you all for having me. I'm looking forward to talking more.
Okay, and we'll move to federal legislation update.
So, Mr. Chair, because of time, we'd like to swap and move to the state legislative subcommittee report, because we need to take action on that. And what I'll say on Fed, just very, very quickly, obviously the infrastructure just passed. We are looking under every rock, trying to figure out exactly how this is going to play out. Talking with Puget Sound Regional Council yesterday, we're all working on getting all the information we can, and we'll just keep rolling that out to folks. So we'll include what we know so far in the after meeting summary, but obviously this is something that's going to be a discussion for the next, I mean, it's a 5-year budget, so we'll be talking about this for at least the next 5 years.
Okay. So if Vina could share her screen, we're just dancing around a lot today for the state legislative piece. Thank you. So I'm going to be quick so that we can finish. Basically, we have had conversations about, one, this is a short session. 2, they have a lot to work with. And 3, next slide, we had way too many things last session. We generally, if we're lucky, get about 10 minutes with legislators during session. And this is what it feels like. These are pieces from my priority list that we were trying to cram into that time frame. And I can talk fast, but boy, it was hard to leap from childcare to I-5 to housing and the like. So next slide. So you and the council formed a subcommittee made up of J.W. Foster, Clark Gilman, Andy Ryder, and Renee Radcliffe Sinclair, and we looked at those issues. And these folks were chosen often because they were ones who were part of those legislative meetings. And so next slide. Basically, the committee met, we talked about all of the issues that are in front of all of us. And, you know, we certainly could go right back to that convoluted list that was hard to talk about. But we have, the subcommittee narrowed it to basically 2 items, one with a couple of parts to it. So the first is transportation. This would be the I-5 Tumwater to Mounts Road piece. And basically, this is the project that we have been bringing to the legislature and receiving pretty regular funding to take the next step. Department of Transportation is our partner with this, as well as the Nisqually Indian Tribe in the kind of environmental work that they are doing. So one of the other issues is there is talk of a multi-year transportation plan or budget. And so we're talking about the biennial budget, we're talking about supplemental budget, but a lot on this one we're talking about when you get to be doing that larger package, we want to make sure that you remember what we're working on. And so there's the ask is basically funding in that multi-year package. And I'll turn it over to Mark in a minute to talk about that highlighted area. Alternative routes. So this is looking at what happened when we had the train derailment and other I-5 issues and what happens, especially down in the Yelm area when there is a backup or when we have to do a detour. So providing that, as well as the transportation demand management strategies that allow us to just keep bringing more efficiency from the system. So that would include encouraging telework by the state employees on the Capitol campus and other employees. Mark, would you like to talk about the money?
Yeah, and just very briefly, we're still looking to get a dollar figure that makes the most sense for the next phase of this I-5 work. So we're looking at estimates for the next 2 phases. We've been doing the planning work, and so the next 2 logical phases in a transportation development project would be the PE phase, that design and engineering phase, and then right of way. And so looking to get estimates on those, and I've had correspondence back and forth with WashDOT as they're finishing up the planning and environmental linkages report, just looking to get a number based in reality. One thing I will say briefly that relates to the federal infrastructure package is one of the things that I've been hearing since it passed on Friday is that this may make it less likely that a state package gets a lot of discussion this session, because now they're going to be trying to figure out how to distribute the federal funds coming to the state. But it makes it more likely, I'm hearing, that they might pass a transportation budget in 23. A transportation revenue package budget. That timing actually works out pretty well for us, so we'll keep tracking that. But that highlighted areas, we're looking to get a specific number, and we're just not quite there yet.
Okay, next slide. So the other piece is broadband. So this is, again, you'll see this highlighted number. We're working with our partners to see what that number should be. And again, this could be impacted by the federal legislation, which provides, let's see, broadband, $100 million probably to the state of Washington for broadband. But that doesn't mean we're not going to ask. And so this is really saying we need more money. What we learned during the pandemic was winners and losers when it comes to access, whether it was telemedicine or school or other ways to be in the world and to do your job. But the second piece of this one would be tie coordination requirements to applications and funding awards. So if the state were to put forward, either using federal money or state money, you know, a grant program for broadband expansion, that the policy request would be that there are coordinated efforts in that community, so you don't have people going off in all directions and create new ways of being disconnected. Next slide. So that's basically two issues. What I'm asking you today is, does this feel comfortable to you? Are you willing to make a recommendation to the council that we move forward with this? We brought this presentation to council last week and they were supportive of it, but our process would be that you would make a recommendation and then the council would have it on their consent agenda for December. So thoughts, somebody ready to make a motion about a recommendation to council to adopt this as our legislative priorities? And let me say just one more thing, and that is when we are in the room with legislators, when we are meeting with them or talking to them on the phone, as bills come up, there will also always be some variation. So while we're in the room, if somebody says, well, talk to me about that Tumwater project. What do you think about that? How does that fit in with transportation or a Yelm project or something else? We're going to be supportive of those local projects and certainly open to talking about whatever legislators want to talk about. But this would be our tight package with these two, transportation and broadband.
Is there a motion?
Well, I don't have a motion, but I do have a couple of clarifying questions, Karen. One is regarding the transportation demand management. I understand the part about encouraging state employees, but what's the intent behind TDM strategies? I mean, is that you know, the bicycle pedestrian network improvements? Is that?
Basically, there were certain recommendations that came out of the study that we are working on with DOT, and that was ramp metering, that was hard shoulder running. So there are some physical things as well as programs like CTR. So how can we make this roadway more efficient? You have seen some ramp metering already happen. It's possible that adding some more of that would be helpful. And it's also possible that doing the hard shoulder running, and in this case, it wasn't just for transit, but for all vehicles, especially around interchanges, would be helpful. So it's just continuing to look at those ways to keep things working efficiently.
Okay, so that helps to understand that. And then the broadband, I've always been confused by this. So what exactly are we asking for broadband? You know, it's a general statement, improve broadband for everybody, but what exactly are we asking money for?
Basically, it would be to fill gaps. So the work that the PUD has done, the Department of Commerce has done, we have a pretty good map, or we're close to it, on kind of the haves and have-nots. Rural areas in particular, there are gaps. So it would be looking to fill those gaps where we now know there isn't good service.
So what, running fiber optic?
Typically, yes. And I'm also going to look at Mark for a minute, who's part of our local coalition.
Yeah, one of the other things that we've recognized, so probably most folks know that we've stood up a broadband action team in our county. And for some of the grant funding, they are now requiring letters of recommendation from your broadband action team. We stood this up because it's needed, but there isn't any funding or kind of framework around really what is a broadband action team? How are we coordinating these things? And we're already in these discussions seeing some challenges with potentially competing grant applications and such. And so some of this is also just, we need, if we're going to be putting a lot more funding to this, we also need to make sure we're coordinating so that we're not duplicating effort or even work, well, duplicating effort or otherwise being inefficient in our work. And right now, no one is tasked with doing that or funded to do that, aside from this loose association of a broadband action team, which I'm participating in just as other duties as assigned. And Jenica Machado from the county is leading this as sort of other duties as assigned. And that's not necessarily the best model for good, solid coordination of these efforts, especially when we're putting large influxes of federal funds and hopefully state funds into this. We need to make sure it's coordinated, and that's something we're missing.
Well, I think any clarification on what we're asking for there would be helpful.
Okay.
But I guess the one point I'll make, and both of these are fine, I think the one thing I'm disappointed is we're not including any pedestrian bicycle ask in here. I know we just completed an ADA plan for our community. I'm sure Olympia and Lacey have as well. I mean, we're going to need tens of millions of dollars just to improve sidewalks in parts of Tumwater. So it seems like, and I know there's a coalition forming to try and emphasize that as part of the transportation package. So, I mean, my preference would be to see some kind of an ask around funding for pedestrian bicycle, or at least saying that if they do fund it, that's made an emphasis as well. But beyond that, I guess I'm fine with these 2 points here. So.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second, this is Carolina.
Thank you.
Any
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to piggyback on Pete. Last time we had somebody come down to talk to us about broadband, I kept bringing up Yokota and how Comcast won't go out there. Yokota, if you want TV, you want internet, you have to get either Dish or DirecTV. And he just flat out skimmed right over that, almost as if no, we don't really consider that rule. So my question is, if private industry isn't going to go out there, how are we going to make it affordable for using taxpayer dollars to bring broadband out there? It doesn't make sense to me. And I come from about, I think it was 5 years that I worked on that kind of stuff. It's very expensive. And you've got to have the population base. Yokota doesn't. And that's why the largest internet provider in the United States, Comcast, won't go out there. So how are we expecting to do a better job than private industry does when they can't afford to bring stuff out there?
I don't have a perfect answer for you.
Okay.
Well, and for the
we just had to throw that out there because it's a question that
Yes.
I brought out and nobody's ever been able to answer it.
Well, and also just for the broadband action team, it's looking at any public efforts, tribal efforts, private efforts. The focus is on getting the service, not who provides the service.
Well, I understand that, but I've lived here since I think '86. I lose count anymore. And Yokota's never had Comcast out there. They had a service for a while that went bankrupt, and ever since then they've had to have Dish or Direct, and any kind of internet service had to come from one of those two providers.
Okay. Well, I think we could ask Mark to bring this up at the coordinating meeting. And it's kind of a hole out there, and I think we're all figuring it out. And we want to have structures in place like this committee and people like you asking these questions so that we can't, if there's money out there, that we're using it efficiently. And I think we're going to make a note of Bucoda and those private provider issues.
Okay, I can give you another one. We were told out here, Rainier, I don't know if Yom is finally there, but Rainier, Tenino, Rochester, all this whole south area, that we were going to have fiber. We've been charged for as if we have fiber, but we don't have fiber.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we're back to
Other comments, if there
other
are any.
comments.
If not, all those
Just
in,
have-
oh,
I just
Yeah.
have one. You mentioned PUD. Is PUD potentially a player that could?
Yes, and they
facilitate
are part of the
bringing-
broadband action team and have been launching their own work on this. So yeah, they are very much plugged in.
Because that might respond to John's concern. In other words, seems to me like PUDs have worked in rural areas and other kinds of things where it didn't make sense dollar wise for private. They would go there because they got funding and they were meeting a need.
Yeah, and I can't speak to it in great detail, but that is the area of emphasis for the Nisqually Indian tribes' efforts, is bringing it to rural, underserved areas.
Well, one other thing that I'd like to add on with Pete, as far as bicycles, many years ago, I think it was 2012, I had actually got to go out back to Virginia Beach, and it was the first place that I saw electric bicycles. Now here, you're seeing them a lot, and we don't have real safe areas for them to ride. So we might start looking at something along those lines, what Pete was talking about, making it safer for them as well, because a lot of the people that, they're not inexpensive vehicles. And, you're looking at about 1,500 for a decent one, and it goes up from there. And we're seeing a lot more older people, I can say this now, my age, that are using those kind of bicycles. So it's something that we should start looking at as well. At least I believe we should.
Yeah, okay.
I'm done.
Call for the question. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is passed. And we are past 8:30. So what would you like to do?
Sorry about that, Chair. I think we are ready to wrap it up, and
Okay.
we'll cover, like I said, we'll cover in a little more detail what we know on the Fed infrastructure package in the after meeting summary.
Sounds good. Thank you all for your attendance and your patience, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank
Veterans
you
Day.
guys. Thank you.